if you, yeah, you can start now.
Well, a massive warm welcome to Coffee Buddies. Here we go again. And we had a small break of a week last week. Boy, did we miss it. And I think there's something that is good about what we're almost called, I think we're calling it focused serendipity, or getting to know you in a sort of random way. Whatever it is, we're missing it. And I think as we're moving a little bit forward in this massive journey since March, we're all still feeling a little bit discombobulated. I love that word, and I think that's what we're all feeling. And we want to continue our connections and doing business in a slightly different way. And today we've got our new format where we've got someone to inspire us, and we're delighted to have Eddy with us again. And then we're going to do a sort of, well, Graham's going to use his famous algorithm and move us around in groups, and we can get close up and personal with Eddy in smaller groups. But let me just welcome, a massive welcome to Eddy. Second time on Coffee Buddies, so he must be good. He came in around about, I think it's probably April, Eddy, and you were, Eddy's a virologist, and it was a great authority to have Eddy coming and talking to us about COVID, and really setting the scene, and you know, giving us some insight into it all. And I found that incredibly useful. I think a lot of people did. But today we've got Eddy to come in and tell us some of the joys of being an entrepreneur in a company that is raising money and doing work in this time, which is not only the COVID time, but it's also the markets that are going up and down, and everything that's sort of strange that's going on. So Eddy is delighted to have us, and maybe we could ask you what you're up to, and you know, what's going on in your world at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Tony. For those of you who don't know me, perhaps I'll just give a very, very brief introduction. I mean, I have several roles, like I suspect everyone on this call has currently. My major role is the Chief Operating Officer of a company called Reviral. I see Michel Debar on the call, and he knows us very well. Hi, Michel. We're basically working on small molecule inhibitors of a virus called respiratory syncytial virus, which now seems like a very small area, but in fact, it's a very big disease and affects every one of us on the planet. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we raised money for that Series C a couple of months ago now, and also a little bit of an update on our clinical studies. I have a role as a chairman of a company called Domainex, which I know many of you know. And I'd like to just talk a little bit about how that company's functioning during the COVID lockdown. And last but not least, I'm a founder of a not-for-profit company called Collaboration Against Coronavirus, 3C, keep it shorter for once. And we're looking for coronavirus inhibitors. It's not for profit. And we've got some very exciting lead molecules that we're starting to develop. It's currently funded entirely by altruistic donations. It was the best fundraise I've ever done. We raised £100,000 in a day. And I could say to everyone, I can guarantee you're not going to see a penny of your money back again. So if you're going to give us money, this is going to go.
I love that, Eddy.
That was brilliant, Tony.
Yeah.
Best fundraise I've ever done. So clear.
So something about Reviral, and maybe just from the beginning, how long has it been going? Because I've known it a while.
Yeah. So Reviral was founded in about 2011, and one of the founders, actually Cora Griffin, is on the call now. Founded out of a group of scientists that work for another company called Arrow Therapeutics, and Arrow was founded by Ken Powell, and they had two big themes: RSV, so you can see a bit of a pattern going forward, and hepatitis C. And after a while, they were acquired by AstraZeneca, who decided they wanted to put some footsteps into virology. And so they acquired Arrow Therapeutics. After a couple of years, AZ decided they didn't want to be in virology. And so basically they spat it out. And the founders came out of from Arrow and founded Reviral. Going to 2011, I joined just after the Series A. Series A was 21 million. I joined as a chief executive officer. We did a Series B a couple of years ago. We raised 55 million. And then one of the things we're obviously considering, like a lot of companies, is doing an IPO. And I decided I did not want to be the CEO of a company doing a US NASDAQ IPO. Too much like hard work for my taste. So I basically took a different route and became the COO. And we brought in a new sort of leader of the company. And it's the team that I'm part of. Our new CEO, Chief Financial Officer, myself, did the Series C. So all working on RSV. We have a number of programs. The lead programs are actually in the clinic currently. 2 big phase 2 clinical studies I'll talk about, actively open and recruiting.
And when you, so your Series A, I mean, you started in 2011. When was the Series A?
About then, Tony. The company starts a little bit before then on angel money, but the Series A is 2011.
I remember it getting Welcome Trust grant, didn't it, at the beginning?
Yeah, very early on. It had a seeding drug discovery fund. And ironically, I was the Welcome Trust representative on that committee. So I saw the group developing the lead molecule right the way through. So when I came to join, I'd done my own personal diligence. I knew very well. I'd given them a really hard time on behalf of Welcome. And they had a lead molecule just before that grant came to a close.
So you started off with a good sum of money, really, 21 million.
Yeah, that 21 for Series A, that was pretty good. What that drove was our challenge model, our phase 1 studies, a challenge model where you infect volunteers of RSV, and getting a second program of replication inhibitors off the ground. You say a good sum of money. We've spent that money really damn fast.
And what was it a single asset play, or was it multiple things you got from Arrow?
At that time, it's all on RSV, but at that time we had one asset, which is what's called a fusion inhibitor for RSV. But what we did, and partly with the Series A, is we developed a replication inhibitor, which is now approaching phase 1 clinical studies. It's just inhibiting a viral protein called N, for those people who like the detail. So basically, it is single play as far as diseases go, but there are multiple programs with different mechanisms of action.
Right. So then you raised a shitload of money a year ago.
About 2 years ago, 55 million. We brought in, we had Orbimed, Edmund Rothschild, or EDRIP, and Deer it's now called, already in. They came back in, and then we brought New Leaf Ventures in, Perceptive, and Novo. So we have some of the world's biggest investors. I'm getting a bit of an echo on the line. I think probably I'm picking up someone's got 2 speakers on, so that's better. That's better. Yeah, so we have some of the biggest investors in the country, in the company, Tony.
Which is fantastic. So what's the journey been like since you got the money, the big money? And I mean, you're spending it like nobody's business. And
oh yeah,
I suppose I just saw Summit raised another 50 million, and I just thought, and that's only going to last a year. And so I was thinking at the time how much it must be costing to do clinical trials. I mean, is it even more expensive with the COVID phenomenon?
Yeah, it is. So we're running 2 clinical trials in parallel, and that basically increases our costs. So the first one, RSV infects babies, affects all of us. Every one of us has had RSV infection. By the age of 2, we're all infected. For most babies, it's just a cold, frankly. But for 1 or 2, it's a serious infection and even life-threatening. So we're running a study in pediatrics. It's worldwide, about 50 different countries, about 70 different clinical sites, although I'll qualify that in a few minutes. It's seasonal, so we're chasing the seasons round. So we're just coming into the Northern Hemisphere's winter season, when we'd hope to see RSV. In the tropics, it's sort of mostly all year round. And then obviously the Southern Hemisphere, we get it in their winter. So that's our first study. And our second one is in bone marrow transplant patients. Basically, if they get an RSV infection, they're in some serious trouble. And we're running that mostly out the USA. We have got sites in some other parts of the world as well. So 2 quite big sites.
How many patients, Eddie, in those 2 trials?
The protocol for the babies is up to 70 babies. There's a little bit of it. It's an adaptive study, so maximum will be 70. And for the bone marrow transplant, the maximum is 120.
So
But I
not,
think
not many patients, but difficult to find.
they are. So in the case of the babies, we started off the study really well. We were recruiting largely from Panama and Costa Rica. And they did a great job for us. And then they got hit by COVID and they all went away and stopped talking to us because they had, frankly, better things to do with their patients. One of the messages I want to put up today is that one of the things we've learned over the last few months is to really be flexible what we're doing. So in the case of the baby study, we very soon started to see a pattern coming out. Those countries that got hit very, very heavily with COVID just were too snowed under. Doctors were being dragged off to look at COVID patients. Clinics weren't admitting patients. And you know, we just didn't want to, these people had a lot of stress and it wasn't up to us to try and persuade them to recruit into our study. They were just too busy. So we recognized that pattern very early, but we also recognized one or two countries where they were still seeing active RSV and they were still able to recruit. And a lot of our focus now is in the Asian Pacific area. So Thailand, Taiwan, Malaysia, for whatever reason, that's a complete new debate. They've managed to control the COVID without completely locking down like New Zealand. And therefore there are respiratory viruses spreading throughout those countries. And we still have sites open, screening babies. And we had the latest patient in last week who went on to the study.
And
So we had to learn to be flexible.
Just tell me, Eddie, what did you know, you've got some super stellar VCs in on your rostrum, and what did they see in you that was so attractive?
I think it's a classical one, Tony. Everyone I know in this call have all know this reality. It's around the management team. Basically, we've all been virologists for hundreds of years between us. Our new CEO likes to say that's 100 years virology experience within the company. And what he doesn't realize, that's just me and Ken Powell. The rest of them add up to another 100. So a lot of experience in virology, but industrial virology. Big pharma background, welcome, Glaxo welcome, Roche. And then we've all adapted to biotech, Arrow Therapeutics, Medivir. So very experienced management team. And frankly, when you get the sort of issues that we're all suffering in clinical studies with the likes of COVID, you need people who really know how to work through the problem. You don't need someone making it up.
Is your drug going to be, is it a niche product and is it going to be very expensive?
No, it's not niche, Tony. You know, you can all bandy around these commercial figures, and I hate to say it in front of Michelle, but basically the market projection for RSV is about 5 billion. Now, you know, sort of, so it's not niche. Will it be expensive? It'll probably be, look at the price of the COVID, remdesivir. It's around about $2,000 for remdesivir treatment. I think it'll be in that area, $2,000 to $3,000. We have to firm that up. But this is a drug, it's not going to be like an antibacterial, where it's very low cost and basically very small market effectively. These are big numbers.
Yeah. So you're exploring Asia, really. You know,
we are currently, and we did something else. When we went out to raise our Series C, what we found was a lot of the funds that we were talking to were locking themselves down. They had a certain amount of money. They were looking at companies in their portfolio and they were saying, I'm going to keep my money back because these guys are going to have to raise money in the next year to 18 months. I can't afford to run out. So no new investment. I'm going to keep my money for my existing portfolio. So we basically started to get a bit more imaginative and we made a very big play for Chinese investors. They've got a lot of money out there. We went for groups that have new funds who hadn't overextended themselves at all. And the only reason we did it was to give us the strategic possibility of focusing the company to a small extent on China.
There's clearly a tension between VCs wanting to, you know, keep their powder dry, as we would call it, and the public market being open, Eddie. That must be a strange tension.
Yeah, we've seriously considered the public markets and we have done quite a lot of preparation within the company. I think most companies still have to have your story right, Tony. I think if you've got a good story and you're doing well, you can still raise money privately. You can still do a public flotation. In our case, basically, our ambition to do a float is all around getting reports out from our clinical studies, or at least part of them. Now, I said before we're still recruiting, etc., which is perfectly true. However, we're not recruiting at the rate that we would have imagined. And so that slowed down our ambition to go to the public market. But if you were ready, if you had your story ready, you could still go.
So, I mean, we've interviewed quite a few people who, you know, their North Star is Boston and their North Star is IPO in America, you know, and so where does that fit in with this idea of, I don't know, value inflection? Because I'm not seeing, I'm seeing that there is a greater desire to go towards the easier ability to float in a bubble versus having a value inflection, Eddie. And do you know what I mean? In other words, I'm not saying anything can go at the moment, but I think there's a general sense in amongst a lot of the UK biotechs that are very American focused that America is the option because it's easier, because it's open. The bubble is here. Now, what I'm hearing from you is the bubble may be here, but we still want value inflection data. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think it's timing, and I think it's not necessarily they want to see inflection. They want to see a number of readouts in the year, 18 months after doing the IPO. And so if you don't have those data points coming through, it's hard to do an IPO. Frankly, they can just sit down and wait for, you know, for the company to become more ripe than that. In our case, basically, you know, our data readout is now going to be in about 6 to 9 months' time. And so we have decided to wait until after that readout and then basically look at the market seriously then. So it's all about timing.
But then will you need something in the following year?
Oh, yeah.
To make it worth the price, you know?
Yeah, and that's one of the values of doing multiple clinical studies. So our adult study should report out in the following year. And so we're crafting the clinical programs, obviously to deliver the right clinical data at the right time. But part of that consideration is to show people there are a number of data readouts over a year to 18 months after you do the IPO. I think if you don't do that, it's very hard to get anything done to the market, because mostly public investors will wait. They want to see something happening a year to 18 months after they put the money in. If it's 3 years, they'll say, thanks, go off and raise it privately. And then basically I'll do the IPO, I'll invest you later on.
So
wait 3 years.
So the dreaded COVID experience has, it's been a setback, Eddie, yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so where's it going to go? You know, where's the next 6 months going to take you?
Well, you can imagine, as a group of virologists, we've got good networks. We find that the problem is you won't get good public information, apart from some exceptions like Florida, who have some local, you know, reviews. Most information you're getting from public health is late. So we're using our networks, and particularly we're using the sites that we have open to monitor RSV locally, almost on a site basis. And what we see is virus coming out now on a steady trickle, I would call it, steady stream, from Thailand and Taiwan, Malaysia. The others are not opening, and therefore we're pulling back from them and basically letting them develop over time. Where is it going to go? You'd like to think by next winter things would start to be unlocking a lot better, but we're still being very flexible, moving our focus around opening up new sites in the Asian Pacific, not opening up sites in places like some of the European sites who just don't have RSV currently.
What are the Asian sites like? Are they well organized?
They're brilliant. They're brilliant. They're really, really good. Very motivated, very professional. I did the kickoff event in Bangkok for our Southeast Asian group, and they're a great group of scientists, very heavily motivated. So pleased with those.
So before we maybe move on to Domainex in the last few minutes, you're going to say something on that, Eddie. What is there anything else you've got about Reviral that you'd like to tell us?
Well, I just saw one question from one of the audience about the Chinese arms, because we're moving now to submit a protocol into China for babies. It's still a way off yet, but that's the route we're going down. And I think the question, if I can look at it, that's wrong. Sorry, I'm moving the wrong mouse on the wrong computer. Main risk to investment. I think we've all got a bit of prejudice about working in China from the past, and I have, where it was largely generic. They didn't really recognize intellectual property and patents, and everyone got a little bit burnt. I had a horrendous deal in China. I got my fingers burnt horribly on these things. I think the new companies coming through, a lot of the people are expats who've worked in America and other places for a long time. They're trying to form platform companies to bring in late stage projects, specifically of China. They're completely different from the old Chinese traditional companies. But I think we all go in cautious. But the great thing is, in terms of RSV, they have huge hospitals. They don't muck around the hospital for a couple, they have hospitals with 5,000 patients and a baby ward of 100 intensive care pediatric beds. So when you want to do a study, you just go there. We're very impressed with what we're seeing so far. Talking to the CROs in the area, and again, very impressed with them.
Yeah.
So I think it's a bit early, but we'll still watch it. But I was still very optimistic.
One word to describe the last 6 months.
Challenging. I think it's basically it's good to learn, even at my age, Tony. And I think we've learned a huge amount. We've learned to be flexible.
Yeah.
And I'll put one last word in for my other company, Domainex, which I'm chairman of. That's a CRO, as most people know in the space. They can't afford to slow down. It's all about cash flow. And so what they've done is separate themselves off brilliantly into 3 teams, separate them so if they get infection, it doesn't cross-contaminate. And they work shifts, 4 days on, 4 days off, 4 days on. They've actually been more productive and beat their budgets because of this flexibility of responding to COVID. The funny thing is, they asked the staff a few weeks ago, right, who wants to go back onto normal work patterns? You know what? They didn't get that many people saying yes. A lot of people like this 4 days on, 4 days off.
Oh, 4 days off. So it's like being in the health, being a medical doctor. Yes, long days sort of thing.
Long days. Get them all done 4 days and then 3 days off. And of course, they move them during the week. So every so often they have to work during the weekend, but then they get time off during the week. And it's surprising how many of the staff said, I'm going to stay like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point.
And the productivity is rocketed.
Yeah, I mean, just anything else on Domainex, my friend, and if not, I'll ask, get some questions maybe coming up from Graham. Graham, is there any questions coming up?
Well, Jeanette had the first question. I was just wondering, did Eddie answer that for you? Do you have any follow-up at all?
Hi, yeah. Well, I'm looking at using Chinese manufacturers, and so any insights on building relationships would be quite interesting.
Yeah, we haven't got as far as that. What we have learned is that you're better being regarded by the Chinese as being an imported study. And that means you don't have to register as a pharmaceutical company in China. So, but eventually, and you probably, Jeanette, know this far better than I do, eventually, if you want to sell and market your drug in China, you have to manufacture it in China. But currently, we don't have to. And in fact, because we're regarded as an imported study, we're best keeping it out. But again, here's my tone, flexibility. We may want to get a second string manufacturer. Currently, we make our compound in Germany. We may want to get a second string in China, because eventually, to basically launch it, we'll have to have it made in China. So we have to start them going. It's not that far off.
Interesting.
I've got a quick question really on, I mean, you've talked about how challenging your clinical trials have been. How do you arrange that? Do you have preferred suppliers running around for you, or what's the kind of setup you would use for that?
So we have a CRO running our worldwide study in pediatrics called Syneos. They obviously operate the CRAs in each of these sites, and then we have our own internal team who basically are on the phone morning, noon and night across the globe, talking to the local investigators, frankly, Graham, supporting them, being aware of the fact these people, if they've got COVID, are under immense pressure, and we are not going to add to that pressure. We want to keep in touch with them, but we're not going to push them. But once we see, frankly, a sign of some RSV in the season, then we have to be there very, very quickly. So on the phone all the while, working very, very hard.
Okay, very good. Has anybody else got any hands to put up? Any quick questions? Oh, Denise has got a question. Oh, if you take yourself off mute, Denise.
Hi, Eddie.
Hi, Denise.
Really good to see you again. I was actually half typing the question. What was I typing? Yeah, Domainex, one of my favourite companies, offers a really sophisticated CRO activity. I'm a big fan, and I'm really glad they're beating budgets. But you know, the companies I'm working with, we're using Covance, and there's been, you know, a big slowdown in the way they've been able to operate, a sort of 6-month lag. And we're sort of rescheduled in now, and hopefully we're ready to go. But obviously Leeds in Yorkshire is not in great shape at the moment. Have you had any experience with them recently, or any feedback on how they're performing?
No, I haven't, Denise, but I would tell you what we have experienced ourselves for the other program I spoke about, which is coming into phase 1 now. We've had to obviously start to get compound manufactured. We've found getting manufacturing slots anywhere is really difficult, and we're competing very heavily to try and get slots. When we've looked at it, we probably won't be able to get new slots up until middle or towards the end of next year. So that's why we're looking at China, because, you know, in a very cautious way again, but we're looking at China because that may be the only way we find manufacturing capacity. It's a big block of manufacturing.
Interesting, very interesting.
I saw Keith off his hand
Keith, yeah, Keith.
Hi, yeah, Keith. Yeah, take yourself off mute.
Oh, hi there. So, Eddie, you were saying about getting funding for your new venture.
Mm-hmm.
Have you managed to get any funding from Donald Trump yet?
Yeah, he's donated bleach to our studies. No, we brought in some high net worth individuals who, frankly, we said on a Friday we raised £100,000. We spent most of that. We're on our way to get another 100,000. We decided not initially to go down the route of trying to get money from VCs, because it is not for profit, or from, frankly, grants or Gates Foundation, because the amount of bureaucracy is so horrendous. We'd rather just do it with these guys who have a big checkbook and can just write a check and get it off the ground. Eventually, we will have to go to other funders once we get more towards animal models or tox studies, for example. But it's gone extremely well, and it's quick. It has worked, Keith. We have a collaboration with a big pharma who very kindly released some compounds that one of our scientists made when he worked for him, and we screened 10,000 compounds within about a month of the company being formed, and we've got some great lead molecules from it. You couldn't have done that, Keith, if we plugged into the Gates or the Trust or the VC. It would take you 6 months to get the money out of them.
Yeah, and you'd have to have waited for the money too, wouldn't you? So.
Yep. So we just went for it.
Yeah.
Dear Graham.
Cheers, Eddie.
Yes. Anybody else got hands up? Or are you all being shy?
No, I think we'll move into the next phase, Graham. So,
okay. Yep, absolutely. We're going to mix you up, everybody, and
ask Eddie questions when you're close up and personal with him.
That's right. And I'll try and get Cora in a different room to Eddie. Oh my goodness, they've changed the way they do the breakout room. So let me just have a look at this. Yeah.
Well, while you're doing that, Tom Blackburn, is he on the call still?
Do you know he had to shoot off at 3 actually?
Okay.
He apologizes.
So but I could have done it while you were looking.
Yeah, go on. If you can do that, Eddie, that would be really good. Did you see his
Tom
question?
asked about all the mask wearing and does that sort of interfere with RSV? And the answer is yes, absolutely. There is no sign of any flu or RSV in the UK now at all. And one of my ex-students is a clinical virologist who covers most of Greater Manchester. And they've seen COVID, a couple of hundred cases last week. They've seen rhinovirus, which you know is a more stable virus than the others. They've seen no flu and they've seen no RSV to date. So these lockdown measures of wearing social distancing, wearing masks, washing your hands, does hit RSV very, very heavily.
Interesting. Good.
Was that the same, Eddie, in Australia over their winter?
Yep. Yep. Now, the only countries that are exception are some of these countries that controlled it very quickly and very calmly. And that's why I'm looking at Southeast Asia. And they've effectively formed their own little internal countrywide bubble. And they're fairly confident to mix internally. So, of course, the other respiratory viruses are still spreading. Not quite as heavily, but they're still being transmitted. But in countries like Australia, no, the lockdown's taken it away. Same here. But it'll come back.
Okay. Likely day. So we're going to go out into breakout rooms, but I think, Tony, say thanks to Eddie. We'll say thanks to Eddie very much for that
Well, we were
talk. I know we're going to come back
Thank
into
you.
the room, but
thank you guys.
thanks
Thank you.
so far. So really appreciate that, and we'll move into the breakout rooms.